Hi, I'm Alison Melley, and I am absolutely honored to be here to share with you what I've been doing to make my classrooms more accessible. I have a couple of goals in sharing this with you. First, to convince you that if you're not already using live captioning when you teach, that you need to. And also to convince you that it can be done with relative ease. You don't have to be a tech savvy person. You might appear to be so after you start doing this and sharing it with your colleagues, though. So you'll notice it's been turned on in PowerPoint while I record. So it may make sense for you to turn off the live transcription in Zoom if you have that turned on, just for this presentation. I wanted you to experience what PowerPoint does and the accuracy of it, etc. So also a note on word use. There's technically a difference between captioning, transcription, and subtitles, but I do use them interchangeably to refer to the speech-to-text capability of presentation and web conferencing software. Also, I invite you to join me in the post-session breakout to get more background on this and also to talk about all things accessibility in the classroom. So I take a proactive approach to inclusion and access. This is somewhat in line with Universal Design for Your Learning, or UDL principles, which is based on the concept of universal design in architecture. So, for example, many of us like to use that wheelchair button to get inside of a door, even though we don't really need it. Or take an elevator when we're carrying a heavy load or our knee hurts, even though we're perfectly capable of climbing the stairs and don't have any legal accommodations, right? So the basic premise is that although some of our students will have successfully navigated the cumbersome and complicated process to access formal accommodations in our classroom, there are many other students who would benefit from some of these kinds of accommodations in classrooms. So the UDL framework sort of takes this approach that if we could make our classrooms overall more accommodating, then more of our students will have access to learning. So in 2020 and beyond, like many of you, I spent a lot of time learning and teaching through web conferencing. I became a bit of a teaching conference junkie. And during that time, I noticed that live captioning was really helpful to me. I could turn off the audio when Zoom noises were giving me a migraine. I could read the captions, even though the speaker's video froze. And I felt that the captions somehow reinforced what I was hearing. So this is considered multiple modalities, right? So we're reading and listening at the same time. And as somebody who gained the ADHD diagnosis late in life, I'm often reflecting on my own experience of learning. This one was impactful. I wondered if, when we returned to the seated classroom, whether live captioning would be helpful. I was especially concerned about it teaching in a mask at that time. And my classrooms are actually large auditoriums. Students have said it can be difficult to follow what I'm saying when I'm far away from them. And, they can hear me, but they can't see me speaking. And that can be challenging for many. So, I wondered, how can we use this technology in the seated classroom? So, a little history here, a little backstory. Some of you know these folks in the show on the TV show Ted Lasso. So Ted speaks American English, but most others in the show speak with a British accent. And even Ted can be kind of tough for me to understand sometimes. I watched this show with my husband and older kids who are college and high school students. And when I mentioned turning on the subtitles, they balked. There was a lot of no way. I hate subtitles. They are distracting. I just want to watch the show. So I accidentally let the English subtitles on when we were watching together, and suddenly we got more of the jokes and there was a lot less of, can you go back a second? I missed that. We also tried it with the Irish comedy Dairy Girls to a similar incredible effect where we could understand so much more of what was going on. I did the same thing while watching Doctor Who with my 11-year-old, and lo and behold, he thought it was pretty amazing to be able to understand better what was being said. This kid grew up watching both Doctor Who and Harry Potter with British accents, but he still found these subtitles quite helpful. There's no doubt that captioning is important in teaching videos. But what about the live speaker? So I decided to try it in spring of 2022, and I was worried. I was up for promotion. My students can be heavily opinionated on their teaching evaluations. So I asked them a lot of times. I surveyed them. I kept telling them to give me feedback, and I didn't hear from anyone that they were distracting. The only feedback I got was that they were helpful, so I continued. So there is solid evidence in the disability literature for the benefit of closed captions on videos for deaf students, or for those with hearing loss, as well as for those for whom English is an additional language. There's also some evidence that video captions are helpful for deep learning in college classrooms in general, but this was all about video captions, and I wasn't able to find anything about live captioning in classrooms that was that had any substantial evidence. So I was like, maybe I should try to collect some evidence here and see what's going on. Is this working or not? Is it actually doing anything with learning outcomes? One day in the 9 a.m. class, my first class of the day, I had about 75 students there, and I truly had technical difficulties, and so I just taught without the captions that morning. And then in the next class, 10:30 class, I had about 150 there, and I was able to get it to work. So as I usually do, I looked at the classroom polling system to compare answers on the two classes. And I don't typically see much difference between those two sections, but there was a slight difference. So we had 78% on the 78% on in with the captions, 78% correct and 72% correct without the ones that didn't have the subtitles in them, right? I wasn't super convinced that was meaningful. So in the next class session, I kind of faked having those technology difficulties again. And this time I let the 9 a.m. have the subtitles, and then I had the difficulties in the 10:30 class. And this was more difficult content. And so what I noticed this time was that in the classroom that had no subtitles, we had about a 12-point lower correction rate of correct answers on the polling. So with this kind of a difference, I kind of felt like I couldn't ethically keep doing this or keep testing it without an IRB, which meant getting somebody to collaborate with me and taking time out of my heavy teaching load. So at this point, all I did was a midterm survey, and that's pretty much at this point all I've done is survey students so far. So I just kept on using captions in every class. So these slides are spring 2022 and fall 2022 combined for a total of 546 students. So overall, survey results are positive. We have only 5% said they were distracting, so 95% of students out of 546 said that they were not distracting. So they said either strongly agree or agree strongly disagree or disagree on that they were distracting. And then 80% said that they preferred having the subtitles over having no subtitles. They prefer listening to the class lecture with subtitles. And then 68% said the subtitles help them understand what is being said. So over here are the means for the students. So the lower, it's a 1 to 5. So the lower ones are saying it's not disagreeing that it's distracting. Preferring subtitles is high, and understanding, improved understanding is higher. So something else that I always like to look at is I want to see that first generation students in particular are not being left behind when I try something new. So if I do some alternative assignments or grading techniques, I like to look at the captioning, or I look at the performance of students who are first generation students to make sure that I'm not leaving them behind in what I'm doing there. Okay, so overall, survey results are positive. I had only 5% of students who said that subtitles were distracting. They agreed or strongly agreed that subtitles were distracting. And then we had 80% who said that. Okay, so as it turned out, in a class one day, in my first class of the day, I had about 75 students, and I had technical difficulties and taught without the captions. So in the next class after that, I was able to get it to work. So since they had the same content and concept checks in their classroom response system, I figured I would look at the scores. Did it make a difference from one class to the other with the captions or not? And that's this first column here. So we had about a 6-point difference. So 78%, 72%. So no subtitles got 72% correct on the concept check, 78% correct with the subtitles. I wasn't convinced that was really meaningful. So in the next class, I did it on purpose. So this time, the first class of the day had the subtitles, and the second class of the day had technical difficulties. So there was a larger difference this time. The content was a little bit more difficult, and there was a 12-point difference. So, I kind of thought ethically, maybe I shouldn't keep testing. I should just always use the captions and then think about down the line, seeing if I could, get it through the IRB to test it out. So I surveyed students. I went ahead, in my midterm surveys, I just went and, asked them some questions about how the captioning was working out for them. So overall, survey results were positive. I had 546 total over the course of 2 semesters. So the testing was only in 1 semester. This also includes fall. And I still only have 5% of students saying that the subtitles are distracting. Everybody else is either answering neutral, strongly agree, or strongly disagree or disagree on the question of whether the captions are distracting. And the most negative theme was about accuracy. So the AI for speech recognition is currently not good enough for disability accommodation guidelines. They're about 70 to 80% accurate. I think the PowerPoint ones do a pretty good job. Sometimes they lag, especially in a large classroom when the instructor's not directly in front of the computer microphone. But overall, students said they helped them to understand me, and when their other instructors used them, it helped them there as well. So we also have 80% who said they prefer listening to a class lecture with subtitles to no subtitles, and 63% or 68% of students said that subtitles help me to understand what is being said. And so they answered agree or strongly agree to those questions. So I also, whenever I'm starting something new in any of my classrooms, a new assignment or grading technique, etc., I'm also concerned with not doing harm, right? Or leaving out those who are already struggling. So one group of students that we typically understand may have a harder time in college is first generation students. So my purpose is to make my class more inclusive, and sometimes our new techniques can take a risk of leaving those people behind. I do ask first gen status normally in my classroom. So I was able to look at, I'm always able to look at, whether they have differences in grades, etc. These 2 semesters, there was no difference with the first gen students. I have another question that's also about having a mentor. So do you have somebody who you can go to in college to help you out or give you some guidance, right? And so this is the breakdown of first gen students with mentors, first gen students without mentors, and then non first gen students with and without mentors. Okay, so the only category that had anything meaningful related to captions was the first gen students with no mentor. And none of them said the captions were distracting. 32% said they preferred subtitles, and 32 out of 34 preferred the subtitles, and 27 out of 34 said it improved their understanding of what was going on in class. So this was more students of a higher percentage of students in this category were saying these things about the subtitles. Okay, let's try this again. Whenever I add something like alternative assignments or grading techniques, I'm also concerned with not doing harm or leaving out those who are already struggling. My purpose is to make my classes more inclusive, and sometimes our new techniques risk leaving people behind if we're not careful. So I do always ask first gen status, and I ask a couple other questions like, do you have somebody to go to answer questions about college, right? So I usually break them down into a category to kind of find a higher risk student. And so those who identify as first gen and say they do not have a mentor, looking at those students, what I saw is actually that they had a more positive response to the subtitles and captions than others. So none of them said captions were distracting. Most of them preferred the subtitles, and a majority also said that it improved their understanding. And so I thought that was pretty compelling. Also, in these particular semesters, there was no difference between first generation students and others, no discernible difference anyway, in grades and concept checks, things like that. So all right, one more time. So whenever I add something like an alternative assignment or grading technique, things like that, change some things in my classes, I'm always concerned with not leaving people behind, not doing harm, especially those who are already struggling. So, my purpose is to make my classes more inclusive, and sometimes our new techniques can kind of get in the way of that. So I don't have a lot of demographic information on my students, but I do always ask their first gen status, and I ask them if they have someone they can go to for advice about college. So so that breaks them down into 4 categories, and you can see the numbers here of people who have mentors or no mentors, and are first gen or not first gen. And this over here on the side in the red, we have the 34 students who said they identified as first generation students and said that they did not have anybody to go to, did not know where to go to get questions answered about college. So this was the only category that stood out when it came to captioning. They strongly preferred the captions. None of them said it was distracting. 32 out of 34 preferred the subtitles, and 27 out of 34 said it improved their understanding of what I was saying. So what did students in general have to say about all of this? Here's some select comments. One, I prefer subtitles. English is my second language. Easier for me to understand. They're definitely not perfect, but they're better than nothing. Subtitles are like a checklist. It helps keep your thoughts attentive and stay focused. Subtitles are just a really nice way of being able to have an extra safety net for things you might have missed. I think they're helpful in the large classroom. I don't care either way, just do what's right for the class. I like that one. And, you know, I understand you may have some reservations here, despite all this positivity. You might be thinking, I can't do technology. And there are some nuances in turning on the subtitles. For example, PowerPoint has a few different versions, and you might have to get some help to get the right version. But after that, it's a very simple checkbox that you can leave on, and so that it's always there. You might say, I'm not in a large classroom, they can hear just fine. But look at those student comments and think about students whose first language is not English. And you might say, I don't use slides. Maybe you don't even bother to put anything up during your classroom. You're having discussions, etc. But even then, if you put up just one simple blank slide and let the captions run, that can make a big difference for things like announcements and such that are important for students to pay attention to. And you might say, finally, I want them to look at me and not the screen, which is another reason some people don't use slides. And I get that. Dialogue is important, but students look away for all sorts of reasons. And mine tell me that, since there's a slight delay in transcription, a second of a space out means they can look up and see what I just said. And, isn't that better than missing it completely? So ideally, you would practice first and have a smooth run of show all set for your class tech to run smoothly. This past semester, I not only had captions, but I also had new polling software, and I also was recording my lectures with a new technology. So I rarely had all my ducks in a row, but I am also pretty highly practiced at messing up in front of large numbers of students. So when I need to spend a few extra minutes making sure that the captions are running, I'm also letting students know that I'm doing what I can to make their learning experience accessible. Regardless of whether or not we find evidence that live captions directly support learning, the fact that students believe that they help, that students viewed the instructor as supporting their learning and comfort is enough argument for me to continue advising others to use them. All right, let's try this one again. Okay, so in sum, we're looking at some preliminary results. I need to get more okay, so in absence of an IRB approved study where I can really test this out, we can look at preliminary results and say that real-time captioning might not hurt learning. It might not be distracting. It may improve attention. It may decrease cognitive load for students. And it might even be something that many students prefer. Regardless of whether we find evidence that live captions directly support improved learning outcomes, the fact that students believe that they help and that students view the instructor as supporting their learning and comfort is enough argument for me to continue advising others to use them. Bonuses all around. Sneak peek at some future presentations of mine. Not only are live captions helpful, but also are other aspects of UDL and inclusive teaching strategies. I'm looking at structured and flexible deadlines. I'm looking at students given choice in their learning, and also how they show what they know. And also, I'm looking at using the polling software for retrieval practice during class time. All of those things do seem to be worth it for my students anyway. Let me know what questions you have. I'd love to hear from you, and I will see you in the breakout room. Thank you.